All right, we're live. Be careful what you say, people. We're live on YouTube.
Good morning.
How's it going, Gareth?
Good, very good. I'm up.
Do you still have your eye?
No, I can see now. Yeah,
Okay.
that didn't take. Only took about 4 days to heal enough to see without pain. So no, I'm all good now. Thanks.
Glad to hear that. Glad to hear that. So, are you going to? How do you say it? To open your video?
Oh, I'm not on, eh? Hold
You're
on.
not on it. That's all right.
There we go. Hey.
So I spent the last hour trying to figure out how to stream this to YouTube. It was a bit of a hassle, but finally I learned how to do it. Because we had streamed it before through Skype during those webinars that we did public, but now through Zoom it's a different system. So I had to figure out how to do it.
Glad your internet's working.
Yeah, now it's working. There is a 20 to 30 second delay though to YouTube. So, all right, Gennaro's here. What's up, mate?
Oh, hello, everyone.
Hello.
Cool?
Helen's coming on board. I imagine Jack should be joining us shortly as well. Adam is coming in as well. Good stuff. I'm going to open up the questions. And cool. All right, we're all set. Adam, Helen, you guys there? Welcome. How you all doing? Everybody has some coffee at hand. I have some left over. Helen, why is it always dark over there?
Because it's later, and I've also damaged my solar battery setup. So I'm on minimal power. I have a candle.
That's good. That's good stuff.
She's representing Europe really well. That's what Europe's all about, isn't it? Cozy, indoors.
I'm trying off-grid living. And,
you look like you're up in Scotland somewhere.
It feels like it here. It's the craziest year weather-wise. Totally crazy.
Yeah. So guys, welcome everybody. We hope the others will join us shortly. Once again, we're live on YouTube. So yeah, this is gonna be fun. We have the questions from some of you. If you got more questions, just write them down in the Zoom chat. And then people who are watching us on YouTube, feel free to write down questions in the YouTube chat as well. We're gonna give priority to our patrons' questions, but the idea is also by the end of the stream, if there's time, we can answer some of your questions as well from our viewers. So good stuff, man. This is gonna be fun. I'd like to say that it's very hot over here. I live in a place that it's kind of funny because you know how when you open the weather app to see how what the temperature and all that, like you've got the temperature and then you've got what it feels like, right? And Lençóis is one of those places that it always feels like it's a lot hotter than it is. So right now it was like 32 degrees, but it feels like 36, 37. So
so humid.
It's too much for me, man. It's a bit too much for me.
The sensation the temperature, that's the sensation of the temperature. Yeah, they do that a lot.
Exactly.
They should just say muggy as hell.
Yeah, that's
Feels
a,
like
that's a
muggy
pretty,
as hell.
I think that's a more accurate term, I guess.
Crazy. Summer's coming
okay,
up.
so the first question that we're gonna answer is Adam's question. He asked, "Do you have air conditioning in your house?" Unfortunately, no, man. Unfortunately, I don't. I don't even have a fan. But I should be moving soon. In a couple of months, I'm gonna have to move, and I hope to get some air conditioning. We'll see.
Yeah, out here in Brasilia, because it's very dry air, there isn't a culture of air conditioning, because the air conditioning, dries the air even further. So
yeah, that's true.
So there's a cultural thing here, but I mean, it doesn't get as hot as Rio de Janeiro and other humid situations, so it's not bad.
Yeah, over here it's
different kind of climates.
Yeah, quite different. I mean, we are in different latitudes, and I'm in the middle of the semi-arid of Brazil. It's like a small oasis, and not such a small oasis. It's like a decent oasis in the middle of the semi-arid. So yeah, it's a bit different climate. Over here, it's a lot hotter because Brasilia is it's over 1,000 meters in altitude, and I'm at 350, 400, and further north. So it's a couple of things that make it hotter.
Right.
Yeah. Cool. Let's get down to the questions, man. We have a couple of questions from Eric, a few questions from Jack, a few questions from Gareth. So let's get right down to it. First question that Eric asked is question about the banana. If you plant the banana for using it as mulch, is it necessary to wait for 1 year and cut? Or can you do it, for example, after 6 months and let it regrow and cut it regularly? It's a very good question, man. It's do you wanna answer that, Gennaro? Start with it.
Yeah.
I'm gonna have some things to add
sure.
later, but yeah, go on.
I mean, yeah, we certainly can cut it, as soon as 6 months. You can even do it a little bit less if it's perfect conditioning and you've got booming bananas. We've actually played with it where we're doing like double bananas once we've planted it for mulching, like banana, a meter away from each other. If we're committed to pruning them, even before the fruit, with the 6 months period. If you got bananas, for example, for vegetable production, you would need to cut it within 6 months, right? So that is a good timing to cut your young bananas, from 5 to 6 months. And just to add to positive experiments we've had here with pruning early bananas, because usually we plant bananas out of clone. Obviously, we can propagate them many ways, but when we plant in a certain scale, we need 1,000 bananas, and we need them all, a bit ill-free. So they come in those clones, and sometimes the first banana that comes out of that clone isn't as healthy or as vigorous as maybe a second banana that's already sprouting from its rhizome, that's already coming in from day one in that spot. Well, this is basically it's a conclusion from results of trials that we've done. And I'm going to get to the point now where we've actually cut the banana 6 months into it, and it's coming with a fresh new shoot, and it's actually produced the fruit before another banana that we didn't cut at all. Okay, so we were actually able to, by pruning and feeding back and stimulating a new baby shoot, that baby shoot actually came through and actually produced the fruit before one that wasn't pruned whatsoever. So that for me was quite impressive. Was that clear? Did people understand what I was, the point I was making there?
Yeah, but
Yeah,
do,
well,
I,
that's perfectly clear.
do I need to make a hole in the banana that you cut, or isn't that necessary?
So you always have to do that, man.
Oh, okay.
Whenever you take down a banana, you need to produce that little bowl, because that will speed up the, how do you call it, man? When you
It kind of
forgot the word.
shoot, right? It aborts that shoot. It won't keep on growing. If you don't
Right,
make,
it's not a matter of aborting the shoot.
not only that,
The shoot even if you do a flat cut, as long as it's close to the ground, you will kill the shoot. But the idea is that accumulating sap will speed up the healing process. That's the word I was looking for, healing process, because it is a cut. And you know, the banana sap will accumulate there, and banana sap will help heal the cut, and it will prevent those what's up, Jack? Those beetles that dig into the banana corms. They will prevent them from laying their eggs. You know, I've actually taken down old banana fields, and just by taking everything down, cutting everything back, and making that bowl-like cut, I completely eradicated the, what's it called, banana borer? Well, I don't know the name in English, but the beetle that digs into the bananas. So yeah, what I was going to add to Gennaro's line is like the frequency that you can take down bananas. It's the same idea. You know, whenever you want something for maximum biomass production, you need to follow that same idea that we've discussed quite a few times of the time of rest that each plant needs, right? It needs to rest enough time so that it can produce leaves and replenish its roots reserves, right? So that when it is cut back, it's got reserves for a strong resprout, right? So for bananas, 6 months is pretty decent timing, because what happens is that you can do it even shorter periods of time. You know, I've done 4 months in a very intensive vegetable system. I was cutting them back every 4 months.
Especially if the
climate
climate
favors, when you do what?
Especially if the climate favors, if everything's summer and it's raining.
Yeah, you need heat and you need water, because the idea is this: when you take down the bananas, you're gonna leave some already established pups, and these pups might already be 1 or 2 months old. So you know, after taking them down, they're already 1-2 months old, and then you're allowing them to grow for another 6 months maybe, or 4 or 5. So they already have a couple of months in advance. So this means that they have longer, and that's a perfect time for banana to really replenish their reserves. And actually, the period of cutting, how often you're going to cut the bananas, will depend on your main crops. So I know that you're planting lots of turmeric, right? Turmeric will take anywhere between 7 to 10 months to harvest. So you can cut down bananas, plant turmeric, and then cut down the bananas again only when you're harvesting the turmeric, because turmeric will accept that shade pretty easily. So that's but then if you're doing intensive vegetable beds that you have to go back to the same bed every 3 or 4 months, you can just cut them back, every 4 months, no problem.
Yes.
Cool. I'm gonna jump here a few questions and answer since Jack's question, because it's also about banana, just so we stay on the same topic. So Jack asks, Felipe, you plant prickly pear as a support species because you're in a semi-arid area, but you also plant bananas. Since bananas need so much water, are there alternatives to banana that are better adapted to semi-arid regions? Yeah, I mean, you're not gonna have a plant that it's the same as a banana. And I do have irrigation here, so this helps me quite a lot. And I'm not exactly in a semi-arid, right? I'm right on the border. I'm on the edge of this oasis that I was talking about earlier. So for example, this year we've had 1,400 millimeters of water. That's not at all semi-arid, but last year we had 830. And sometimes the distribution of rain is completely erratic, where we have 150 millimeters one day, then 2 months without rain. And so for example, right now I've just had, we're already adding up to 3 weeks without rain, which is quite bad, but it's, yeah, but it happens. It's kind of crazy. So I would never plant bananas here without irrigation, unless it was already in a well-established system, you know, with an improved soil where I had lots of organic matter. Then I could potentially do bananas without irrigation, you know, getting the time of planting perfectly right, lots of organic matter and all that. Because if you have, you know, 800 millimeters of rainfall, you could potentially harvest bananas. Of course, if you have 1,500, 1,600, you're going to harvest a lot more, but still you can do bananas. As for other crops in semi-arid places, we really have to go for lots of cactuses, right? Which will store lots of water, and they will even go further than banana plants, because they will actually absorb water from the atmosphere. Prickly pear, for example, and prickly pear can be planted in very high densities, and of course they're not going to occupy the same niche as the banana plant, in the same that they're in different stratum, they're different succession stage, but they will serve the purpose of producing that organic matter which is rich in water. Of course, they are not as practical to work with, because, you know, the bananas, you take them down, you split the trunk in half, and you've got that perfect organic matter to lay on your beds. The prickly pear are a bit trickier, because ideally you want to, you know, chop them down to pieces, because otherwise they just sprout. You know, if you just throw them on the soil, they'll just take root and sprout. One technique which works nice is you make thick layers of prickly pear. You can have the whole cladod, I think that's the name in English, clado, I don't know, whatever, those pieces. And if you just lay them on the soil, you know, thick layers like this, the ones on the top might try to sprout, but the ones on the bottom, they'll just rot and release that water into the soil. That works very nicely. And also I'm thinking of some tools that could be used for pruning and shredding, not shredding, but slicing the prickly pear. You know, maybe you could have a machete with 4 blades that you just go around, and you just, you know, as you prune them, you're slicing them into thin pieces. Or you have those hedge pruners, motor hedge pruners. If you had also blades stacked, like 3-4 blades, you could just come around and you know, cut them in small pieces. That's something to think about. But yeah, I mean, I would just say heavily rely on cactus. Here in Brazil, we also have mandacaru, which is like a high to emergent cactus. It grows pretty big. It becomes a bit like a tree and absorbs huge amounts of water. It's from the Cereus genus. I'm going to write it here. Actually, I'm going to write it in the YouTube channel, I guess. Cereus, that's mandacaru, Portuguese name. It produces an edible fruit. So lots of benefits to planting these cactuses. And like I was saying, they will absorb water from the atmosphere, and they will be making photosynthesis throughout the whole year. So they're even, I would say they're even better than banana, because banana will stop doing photosynthesis if it doesn't have water, if temperatures are too high. too hot, there's no water, it will simply stop doing photosynthesis. It's going to start losing leaves. Whereas, prickly pear and other cactus, they will just be doing photosynthesis all year round and absorbing that water from the atmosphere. They will grow without water. You can plant them, there's no rain, and they will produce new matter. They will produce new shoots. They will grow. Agaves are also amazing for that purpose, for semi-arid places. Agaves are, you need to use them. These are just, they're even more important than these cactuses, I would say.
Yeah. Is there a particular kind of prickly pear that has less spikiness that you use, or you just go with the ones you just live with it?
No, there are some. I've got some that have very few spikes. Very very little spikes. I recently acquired one that has no spikes at all. It's a very different variety. I had never seen it. I have another one that people claim, oh, this is spikeless prickly pear, but it does have one. Every now and then you find one. But this last one that I got has no spikes at all. Nothing. Zero. So you can put it on your face and it's no problem.
So do you think with some of your systems where you have dry species like pigeon pea, castor bean, but cashew maybe as one of your productive ones, will the bananas eventually be okay without irrigation? Is that kind of the idea in these drier systems, but where you do still have bananas?
Exactly. That's the idea. And then we have to think of how dry it goes. Okay.
Sure.
I would think of a threshold for banana plants to be like the bottom threshold, something like 700 millimeters. I believe that if you have 700 millimeters distributed in at least, let's say 4-5 months during the year, it should work fine for your banana plants. Less than that, then it might be a bit of a stretch, right? And then, if you have 700 millimeters distributed in, this 3-4 months, and you get the pruning of the banana timing right, you might be able to get somewhat a decent crop, And then the more wood you have on your soil, the more you have decomposing wood, the more you create that soil that maintains water and that absorbs water. And the more you've got cactuses, the more you've got watery stuff absorbing water from the nutrient, the atmosphere that you can be cutting down and feeding to your soil, the better your bananas will thrive.
Interesting. I don't know, do different species of banana make a difference too? I know out here, I've seen red bananas growing like in the wild on their own and actually producing fruit when all the other ones are just struggling. So I don't know if maybe that's a more dry species.
You should definitely look for these varieties that you can already see that adapt well to your place. Their bananas will vary a lot. Here in Brazil, for most situations, there is a banana which is we call it prata, right? That's silver in Portuguese. I think it's called burro bananas in English. It's the most well adapted to most situations, and it will withstand some colder regions and all that. So I think you should definitely look for varieties that you see that work very well. You could also look for try plantains. I think plantains, I see them as something a bit less demanding than bananas. So you could also look for that. They have a lot less water in the fruit. So that would already, suggest that it needs less water to grow. I don't really have the data to know that, but it just looks to me they're just a lot more, a lot less demanding, right? And what was I going to say? And one important thing, especially over there, since you've got these heavy clay soils, I've got this. How do you call this? I forgot the name you call this in English. How's it called?
Tweezers.
Tweezers. Yeah, I was taking pineapple pricks from my hand. We're talking about pricks now. But since you've got heavy clay soils, there's a good chance you have compacted layers. Compacted layers could, usually there are between 10 and 30 centimeters of depth. They could reach down to 1 meter. So it's very important, if you're in a dry climate and you're planting something that's a bit more demanding in water, for you to have a very well structured soil, so that your plants can dive their roots deep into the soil in order to reach that water, because the moisture will be retained in deeper layers of the soil. Even if you're 2, 3, 4 months without rain, but there's moisture 3 meters down the soil, and plants, they will go down and look for that as long as you give them condition. So one thing which is interesting, when you are planting your bananas, make sure that the nest that you open make sure you destroy those compacted layers that you might find. So that means maybe opening up 60, 70, 80 centimeters of depth, to make sure that you have, in different spots in your place, like those channels which will, for plants to have access to that sort of depth. And of course, as you improve your soil, as you put organic matter, as you activate the microorganisms and worms and all sorts of small animals, they will slowly, and gradually improve your soil structure. It goes back to that idea that our tools, be it manual tools or tractors, they do not make the soil better, right? They undo damage, they decompact, but only microorganisms and animals and plants' roots will actually make the soil better and improve its physical structure, in order for plants to be able to explore bigger chunks of soil, deeper depths.
Cool, that's a big help, thank you.
That was heavy rains out here.
Oh,
I'm still back with the pears. What I was gonna say about the prickly pears and the cactus in general, Felipe already said that they do photosynthesis all year round. But again, we're looking for things that we can cut green in the drought, right? Things that maintain green throughout the whole year. And then, things that are ready to chop and drop, even if you've gone for 3 or 4 months without any rain. So that's the beauty.
Yeah, definitely.
Do you guys ever use canna lilies?
Yeah, I don't have canna lilies over here. I can see that Eric does, but they're pretty water demanding, aren't they?
Right. Yeah, they probably are.
Much like ginger, turmeric, they grow close to riverbanks, stuff like that. Isn't that right? I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think they're probably a little bit. They don't much like the droughts, perhaps. But as a mulch producer, if you can grow them well, would you say that they're a good option?
Definitely, because they do. Eric, you can correct me if I'm wrong, and maybe you can talk a bit about canna, since you have them over there. But they are a shade crop, right? They can easily withstand fruit trees, shade, and all that. So maybe they're a good understory, easy to cut, like perennial ground cover that you can, just cut them every 3 or 4 months. What do you say, Eric?
Yes, I noticed here, but we have a humid climate, so they grow. I don't live near a riverbank. I'm at my plot is at a height, so it's fast drying here. But I think the nights are very humid, so the plant live on. But it is, for me, it's you can eat the corn. You can eat it if you want.
I didn't know it.
Yeah, but for me, it's a biomass plant, because every 3-4 months you can cut it, and The only thing you have to that it can be invasive if you throw it, if you put the corn out and you lay it anywhere, then it sprouts, and the seeds also the seeds also grow new plants. So if you don't, but yeah, that's the whole agroforestry. You have to maintain it, and then there's no problem. But it's for me, it's an especially biomass.
How tall does it grow?
Yeah, about, when I look outside, about 2 meters. Then it gives a flower. Yeah, 2 meters.
2
high.
meters?
Yeah.
Oh, that's a lot.
And it gives red flowers. This one gives red flowers, and then it seeds. And the seeds, if the seeds touch the ground, then it forms new plants. So it's once you have it, then it's hard to relieve it.
Rid of it.
But yeah, it's, for me it's good. For me it's good.
Yeah, and it's easy to cut, right? Because it's got very soft stems. You know, with a sharp machete, you can just cut it easily. Yeah, cool.
And
I think it's a great perennial cover.
Yeah.
Especially if you're doing, you know, Adam, for your place, that might be interesting to look at as well. You know, when you're working with high stratum plants, emergent stratum plants, stuff that's going to be that can easily withstand a low stratum plant that reaches up to 2 meters, and it's easy to cut, and it will, you know, just take over everything. That's an interesting thing. It's Canna Lily, is that it?
Yeah,
Canna Lily. So it's yeah, pretty interesting, because, you know, Adam, bamboo, so you just go really tall, so you just have a like this bottom layer, really prolific bottom layer that will take over everything. I know how that's gonna affect shoots production though, since the idea is shoots production, and the shoots are gonna be, you know, over there in the bottom layer, might be a problem. We need to experiment with it. All right, Eric also asked, I planted in a bed of 40 centimeters wide, a row of turmeric with in between corn, and a row of amaranth and corn. The next bed, also 40 centimeters wide, I planted 2 rows of Mombasa grass with in between a small pathway to cut the grass 10 times a year. The next bed is the same as first one. Is this a good combination, or is elephant grass a better option? Gennaro, you take that, man. You're the grass producer.
Yeah. So would you just repeat the end there after the Mombasa double Mombasa grass? How does it? What are you saying about the elephant grass?
He's asking if it's a good combination, or is it the elephant grass better than Mombasa grass for that specific combination? You know, turmeric with corn and amaranth, and then, you know, 1 bed of that, another bed of grass, right? 1 bed of corn, turmeric, amaranth, 1 bed of grass.
Yeah, sure. Well, this is the trick. If you've got your turmeric beds close to the vegetable production beds, it's key that, you know, we're cutting the grass regularly. We're cutting it before it produces, before it even thinks of producing seeds, right? So always that meter, that 1.2 meter high cut maximum. So we're keeping that fresh information. We're not letting, you know, old grass. So information wise, in relation to, you know, the neighboring bed, this is the key, to keep it always fresh information of new shoots, and never aging or you know, that kind of grass that's wanting already to produce seed, or in elephant grass, in Napier grass case, the stem. Well, the difference between the Napier grass and the Mombasa grass, as far as our systems are concerned, is the potential, the Mombasa's potential to withstand more shade. right? For me, it's very clear that the elephant grass can produce more than the Mombasa, even though Mombasa is king at biomass. The Napier grass can be even better, right? So the Napier grass is more vigorous, especially initially, right? But the tendency of the, in agroforestry systems, the tendency is for things to shade off. So then that's when you switch. You see, in our course, which we've done here, which, the course that's on YouTube, we've got a grass system where we have the Mombasa planted, right? The Guinea grass, Mombasa, and we've got at the edges of the Mombasa, the elephant grass, the Napier grass. And very quickly we're harvesting Napier grass. The first year, the Napier grass, we've taken 2-3 cuts, and you haven't even seen the Mombasa. They're so thin from seed. They're much slower. If you consider it like that, they're much slower to mature. They're very thin, and then they take a little bit longer because they come from seed for you to have that first cut, and then it kind of starts thickening up to start, how we say, man up, to really start producing more vigorous volume. As to the Napier grass, you put it in, if you leave that one eye out, count 20-30 days, and depending on the conditions that you're at, 30 days you're taking your first healthy cut. So the point is, the elephant grass is a lot more vigorous in open areas, right? I do find as well, both grasses are very demanding. From what I see here, the Napier grass has more potential to suck your system if you don't return it, if you don't feed back the system. If it's a system where, let's say, in my case, if I end up exploring these grasses, I harvest these grasses, both the Napier grass and the Mombasa grass. I harvest this for animal feed. I don't use it for mulching, which, it's the ideal situation. But because I have the need, I harvest this. So I've actually gone to the extreme of over harvesting both of them, of actually exploring more than I should, within my time, within my experience, with our experiments and testing the boundaries. And I have seen that the Napier grass does steal more from the system. It does damage more the system if you don't return, if you're not feeding it back, you see. So this is another point. I find that it is more aggressive with, with stealing from, but again, it's more aggressive producing. So maybe that's the simple answer. So if you're returning it, you see, and I've had good results in the recent years where we've been more disciplined with returning the energy, whether through, through the manure coming back or through the mulching of itself. The Napier grass does produce more volume. And if you're in an open system, if you're not in a forestry system, or if you are in a forestry system, the first 1.5 to 2 years, the Napier grass will produce more, and then you got to switch to the Guinea grass, the Mombasa. If you're in a vegetable system, like the one I've recently designed here, the Napier grass for the vegetables, I've not put it in any trees, then I can be harvesting Napier grass for over years to come. As long as I keep on coming back and producing crops in the middle, because that's the way I found to be disciplined with returning, the energy. Because it's a little bit of theory. If I say, no, I'm going to, give it to the cows, and every morning my boys are going to pick up the shit from the cow and bring it back to the Napier grass. If we don't have to do it, they just won't do it because there's other things that are more urgent. But since, we've gone down the route of we're actually producing crops in between the Napier grass and, constantly renewing that forces us to really be aggressive, with returning the manure, with really reinvesting in that grass bed, right? So, in relation to one or the other, The Napier grass is more vigorous, but it won't withstand any shade, you know, a little bit of a half shade, but then, you know, when we're talking about shade, and there's no question about it, it's the Mombasa. And just keep them freshly pruned. If you're, you know, neighboring other crops, you know, other vegetable crops and things like that.
Okay. It's, yeah, because I asked it because of the turmeric. That's the crop I want to grow. So the other, the corn, and then the amaranth, and then the Mombasa grass is feed for the...
They will be okay. It's just keeping to the principle of cutting them, you know, at a meter tall, you know.
Yeah.
You don't want to let it, you know, as long as you cut it at a meter tall, either of those will work fine.
Yeah.
And because it's very quick, it reaches a meter very quick. So, you know, maybe, you know, in the best times of year, you know, 20 days after a cut, it's not bothering the neighboring bed, but in 35 it will be. So it's very quick, you know. So you'll have like a period of like maybe 5 to 4 days where it's actually bothering, and then you give it a cut. You know, I let it, you know, borderline the negative influence, so that you actually, you know, you're making the most of it, and you're giving it time to rest. I'm not going to cut it every 20 days. I will cut it every 30, 35 days if, you know, if it reaches that meter. But it really, it's the information, isn't it? It's the negative information that you don't want with you know, with the crowding. But, you know, as soon as it reaches that, you can remove it. And then, so we're talking about 35 days cut if it's good rain, things like that.
Yeah, thank you.
Either of those grasses, for either of those grasses.
Yeah.
You know, the Mombasa, maybe an extra 5-10 days.
Can I just ask, when you're growing elephant grass or Napier grass, you're making a bed for the grass and then you're mulching the paths, is that right?
Well, I personally, I like planting the elephant grass in the borders, in the outside borders of beds. So that could be tree rows, tree beds, or vegetable beds. You know, I like planting them in the outside borders. You know, because I love the system of actually planting them in a bed. I wouldn't, you know, plant it flat out, like, you know, like in monocultural systems, conventional systems, or I wouldn't give it a little bed for it. You know, I love the idea of planting beds and having them in the borders, and it's really just making good use of all that energy that would have otherwise escaped in the border. And really, you know, where it would be so much weed in the border, you know, because you put that organic matter in the bed, and on the borders, it just kind of like organic matter just loves falling off. You know, you really need to have a lot of organic matter so that sticks on. So it's that kind of border which is so fragile to exposure, where a lot of the organic matter tends to fall off quite easily. You know, so I like, you know, structuring this with roots, you know, and you know, since the borders is where you're likely to lose your organic matter, it's going to be exposed, and you're going to be losing humidity through that, right? So I love, if I'm not planting elephant grass there, I'm usually planting corn, you know, little seeds of corn every 30 centimeters in the borders of vegetable beds and things like that, and tree beds, because I just love structuring those borders with roots, you know, and making good use of that area that's outside our flat bed, you see. So those borders are really, really ideal. I love planting, say, sugar cane, you know, corn and the elephant grass. I wouldn't, however, even though you can, I don't personally plant the Mombasa in the borders, you see. I'd much rather plant Mombasa. I have 2 lines straight as in, you know, in the actual bed, you know, within the actual bed, because you kind of seeding, and in the borders it's kind of dangerous where that water could, you know, that seed, I can't trust that seed not to fall away and wash away. So, you know, because you plant it by seed, you know, you need it to have it in the cup so that the seed, you know, is well stable. And I also like planting it, you know, in lines horizontal as you go down the bed in horizontal lines, where you can have it like a line of Mombasa, a line of onions, a line of Mombasa, a line of onions. And then you prune this Mombasa to feed the onions. And then after the onion leaves, then you got the legacy, everything closes up, big Mombasa. You know, and even when you plant it in line, it's good for you to come back and chop it because it's organized in line. You can come with a machete and you know where you actually aim in. It's, you know, it's in line. I have planted Mombasa by the cuttings, you know, taking cuttings and putting them in. It took longer to establish. You know, it took even longer to establish. It was a little bit sensitive. At the time, I thought it was really cool because I could place it where I wanted it. I could do the proper lines, and then you know, some of them died, and then I had to replace them. You know, I thought it was like a breakthrough where I'm planting them, you know, from cuttings. But you know, looking at it 2 years later, it took longer to establish than seed. Even though in seed it comes very thin, and you need that second or third cut for it to establish. From cuttings, it took even longer really to take up that spot. So it can be done if you haven't got the seeds, for example. If you've got a nice bunch and you like to propagate it, you can actually, you know, do it through cuttings, you know, just rip out a bit of the root and stick it in as well.
They establish better if you're doing not through cuttings, but through root division. But actually getting chunks of the root with chunks of root.
Yeah. That's what I mean. The term, I didn't get the term, but you're ripping out the roots and.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but it's always better when you have seeds. It's just a lot cheaper to establish stuff through seeds. But yeah, when you don't have it, it's definitely a possibility to use it like that.
It served me well because I wanted to plant 1 or 2 beds, and if you go out and you buy a sack of 5 kilos, you know, of Mombasa seed, you can plant, you know, whole hectares.
Yeah, of course.
So
exactly.
So you know, it's practical. I planted it, and it can be done basically.
Yeah. Let's move on then. Jack asked about soil preparation here. He says, how do you prepare compacted heavy clay soil for planting without access to a large tractor? Is a micro tractor strong enough? It really depends on your, I mean how much clay there is and how compacted it is. I've worked with like small tractors, like motor, how do you call them? Motor cultivators. You know, those very small 6 horsepower small tractors. I've worked in places, you know, of up to 40% clay content, and it does take a lot longer to do the job, you know, but they're usually pretty robust machines, and they can go, you know, kind of dive deep into the soil. But I find it's always it does make the job easier if you get a big tractor with a harrow and just go through the whole site beforehand, and then come with the small tractor just for making the beds. But you can do it without without a big tractor. It's definitely possible. With a small tractor, you just need more time. You just need to give it time to work, you know. And you actually have to be careful in these heavy clay soils with use of machinery, because you need to get the moisture content of the soil in the perfect amount in order for the tractor to be able to work. If it's too dry, not only the tractor might not be able to go in with its hose, but it's also gonna create these big chunks of soil, right? Big blocks of soil that it won't be able to destroy. If it's too wet, and I've experienced this personally, the tractor, it's just the soil is going to become like a muddy kind of a pudding-like texture, and the tractor won't be able to dig in because it's just going to slide on the soil, and that's actually going to start sealing the pores of the soil. That's a big problem of working with machinery when the soil is too wet. So you really need that perfect moment when the soil is wet enough, which is what we call friable. I don't know if there's such a word in English, but friable soil is when if you get a chunk of soil, you can and you squeeze it into your hands, it's going to break off and crumble, and it's not going to simply be, if it's too wet and you press a chunk of soil, it's just going to how to say it, you're just going to create a small depression on it, but it's not going to break. And then if it's too dry, you're just not going to be able to break it because it's just rock solid, right? So getting that perfect moisture content of the soil makes a huge difference when you are working with this small tractor. Over here right now, I have the perfect soil for working with these small tractors because it's a very loose soil. Although it does have a high clay content, like 30%, if I'm not wrong. It does also have a very high sand content, so it's pretty easy to work with, even if it's dry. But if it's too wet, then I cannot work with it. It doesn't work anymore because it becomes that pasty thing where the rotary hoe just slides through it, and it ends up doing more damage than good, right?
Felipe, do you think?
Yeah.
Do you think in Jack's case, he's considering animal system as well? Basically, maybe play around the soil as least as possible. Maybe come in and just do a line where you're going to plant your trees. I understand we're talking about tractors still, but maybe a subsoiler just in the line of where you're going to plant your tree, or something of the sort. Something where you don't have to be putting heavy machinery on your clay, and and make good use of the native grass that you have there, which is Mombasa. It's great. And try play around the soil as easy as possible, and service crops to better your soil. Options. Try play around with it. Maybe less is more on that situation. What do you think, Felipe?
Yeah, I think it depends on what the plans are, because even for the tree beds, you are going to need a bit of you will need to prepare the soil. But definitely in every situation, we should play with machinery as little as we can, independent of the situation. Of course, if you're doing animal systems, you're going to need less machinery than if you're doing a vegetable system or a fruit system.
Yeah, maybe it becomes more viable for the micro hand tractor. If you only have to do one bed, and then 12 meters later. So so then you can do it with smaller machinery, even though it's more labor. But you consider you don't have to do the whole plot. There's no need for that when you've already established your grass there, and just make good use of what you have.
Yeah, that's kind of what attracted us to doing like fruit trees and animals in the middle. We probably won't be doing a whole lot of vegetables just because of that condition of the soil. But so anyways, we were trying to just do those lines like you suggested, Gennaro, and we asked a friend if we could borrow their micro tractor, but he warned us just that in this area, they really only use micro tractors for like re-tilling beds that have already been used. He said it's not strong enough to be like the first break of the soil. So I was just curious if you guys had experienced that, and if there were other tools, or does he just does he just not have a strong enough micro tractor? Do we need a higher horsepower or different, maybe like a different micro tractor?
You would have to prepare the area before the tractor comes in. You'd have to use the the grass cutter. How do you call it? Roçadeira, Felipe?
Brush cutter?
Brush cutter.
Yeah, the brush cutter. You have to cut the grass really, really low, and then with like a fork, remove that grass. Don't let that mulch stay there. So you remove it all out, So you've exposed it, you know, so you've prepared it, you're actually the most exposed possible. It's not going to work if you cut it high and then you got to go and through, you know, more roots and more, you know, more grass.
No, you got to weed out the grass. Actually, it's not.
You got to weed it out.
Right. You need to take out those chunks of roots in order for the tractor to be able to do it. But what there is one thing that you can do to help out, and some small tractors, they have that possibility, which is to take away some of the rotary hose. For example, my tractor has 2 sets of 4. I only work with 3 because then you've got concentrated power on less surface area. And actually, ideally, I'd like to work with only 2. And I'm thinking of buying a pair of extra ones and actually have them cut, because my tractor has there's the last pair. So I got 4 on each side, and then the last one, I can take it out. You know, it just comes like that. You can just take the pin out and take it out. But the other 3, they're like one block, so I can't simply take them out at will. But I'm planning to get an extra pair and actually cutting them out so that I have a set of only 2, and that's gonna have a width of cut of 60 centimeters, which for me is perfect. Actually, for me, it's better than 80 centimeters for the stuff that I'm doing for my systems. For your case, it would work out pretty well as well. You know, if you just had a smaller one, and so all that horsepower is going to be concentrated on that. But here's what I would recommend, which I think is it's an interesting possibility. You use, maybe you could buy that, or maybe you can get it rent. I think this is going to be more important for you than the tractor, since you're focusing on like fruit trees and trees. There's not going to be vegetable or anything. So more important than preparing a bed is to prepare the nest for your plants. Okay, so you get one of those motor drills to dig soil, and you know, though, because then you can dig. You're going to open these like channels in the soil, and then you can just dive really deep, up to 60 or 70 centimeters. It depends on the drill size. And so you make individual nest preparation for that. If you want to go a bit further, and I would recommend you do, after you drill these nests and you prepare them and you manure them, you can come with the tractor on top of the nest, and then you don't have to worry about diving so deep with the tractor. Then you just want to prepare some 10 centimeters of soil, you know, to have a bed, even if it's a shallow bed, so that you can have stuff like, you know, whatever green manure you want to add to the border, some jack beans, some pigeon pea, some prickly pear, whatever it is that you want to add to the border, those service plants, which don't need so much preparation, right? So you don't need to prepare like the perfect 30 centimeters deep bed for them. So you imagine you're going to have like these well-prepared deep nests in the soil for your fruit trees, and then you're going to have a shallow bed covering the whole row of trees, you know, for planting additional stuff. And of course, the roots will, the plants, your trees will thank you for the extra prepared surface layer of the soil, you know, where you're going to add a bit of manure. So I think that's, I mean, I have no doubt that the small tractor will be able to do a small, just incorporating some manure on the surface of the soil, and then just come heavily with lots of mulch. And this will be what's most important, you know. If you just do the holes and come with huge amounts of organic matter, that's already going to suffice, because then plants' root will just colonize the surface of the soil without a problem. They will do that, you know. So I think that could be a good solution.
You know what I find? That goes perfectly with you know, just doing the minimum, just going locally, getting your energy local to where your seedlings are going to go. One thing that is interesting about this as well, once you do that hole through with that machine, you know, with the driller that drills the holes, that tends to throw out the sand or the soil to the sides. And this information of this soil to the side already it aids in buffing off, existing grasses and weeds. You see, so you've done your vegetable bed, a few centimeters, your vegetable bed, I mean, your tree bed or tree row, a few centimeters. Now, once you've done that big hole, if you're doing it like every 50 centimeters or every 75 centimeters, or even every meter, if you're doing, very dense holes next to each other, that the soil that gets thrown out, they actually touch each other, and it actually creates a second information. You've already tilled it a little bit, and now you've got the second information of the soil that's come out from deep down, and it's actually disturbed that grass. And and once you plant, and then maybe that takes a couple of days, because ideally everything happens in one day, but it might be a large enough area where you've actually tilled it, and then maybe 3 days later this thing wants to resprout, and then you disturb soil, making the holes, and then maybe a week goes by, and then you're closing the holes or you're planting the seedlings, and then you're disturbing the area again, and all of this ends up disturbing the nearby weeds and grass. So that's one thing I liked as well about drilling the holes, the amount of soil that comes out, and that aids in disturbing the weeds around where that tree seedling would be.
And is that soil probably doesn't have much life or anything in it because it's coming from so deep? So would that be soil that you would use more outside to like form the like the raised part of your nest? That wouldn't be very useful soil, I assume, right?
Yeah, this is the negative part of using one of these drilling machines, because it just comes in and throws it all out, and yeah, you get all that deep soil. It's not organized basically, because if you're doing it manually, you could take the first half, we call it horizon A, put it to the right, and then you take the horizon B and put it to the left. And when you're going to fill it up, you invert it. You got that topsoil, you put it down, and then you get that weaker soil and replace it in the top, because we understand that far deep down, we're not going to be able to have access to that again. And as most of the life works, in the top, I can recover this weak soil, and so we get the best and put it down there, and then so then you get that weaker soil at the top, and you can spread that out. That's going to be manured, and that's going to be mulched on, and that you can create life on top of that dead weaker soil. But once you go with the machine, it's really unorganized. It's kind of like in the average it gets mixed up, and then it's
going to mix everything up. So there's basically no way of separating.
It. So
you're just going to have to put, just put lots of manure on it, and I think that's it's going to work out fine.
And did you say you would till it first with the micro tractor and then drill the holes, or did you say the other way around, drill the holes and then run the micro tractor?
I said you drill the holes and then you come in with the micro tractor.
Okay.
It's going to make your life easier.
Okay.
Because otherwise you're going to be doing the same work twice with the micro tractor. I mean, because if you drill the holes, there's going to be big chunks of the soil which are already prepared. So you just come with the micro tractor and do everything on top of the hole.
But wasn't the holes going to close up in that situation?
Sure, but he's going to have to open up to plants later anyway.
All right, you need to know where it is.
Yeah, of course, you need to know where it is.
You have to find it or mark it or something like that.
Yeah. All right, another question by Jack. Gennaro, in your video about Bruno's 2-hectare system, you planted a simpler system using less organic matter inputs, less dense planting because of the scale. Can you explain what other changes are usually made when planting larger systems?
Yeah, I won't say it was less dense. There's less variety. I mean, we're planting a tree seedling every 75 centimeters. So, here in my house recently, I've done every meter. So, every 75 centimeters, it's denser. And then I would even go as dense as every 50 centimeters. But we did plant a seedling there every 75 centimeters. What we have done there is planted less variety. You know, we made a very simple system because, you know, he's not exactly an agriculture, you know, he hasn't got this background. It's not like his main income, and, you know, it's not like he was, you know, jumping to spend, you know, a couple of 100,000 or whatever, as you could do in 2 hectares if you wanted to. So I try to keep it simple for him, because he came to the possibility of, like, you know, we can do it in stages. We plant a little bit of this, and then next year a little bit. And, you know, I felt that if I could cut the cost, we can do the whole lot in one go. So, you know, ideally we want the macadamia and we want the avocados as well. But, you know, macadamia seedlings, they were like 35 reais, all right? Avocado seedlings, they're like 15, 20 reais. So this is very expensive when we're talking about, I need 1,000 seedlings, all right? So we went for, you know what, we planted coffee, papayas, and bananas by seedling. The papayas, we negotiated them at 150 each, just R$1.50 each. The coffees, they come at R$1 each. They're like 70 cents. The shipping cost R$1 each. For the bananas, which is the most expensive, but even though we got it, you know, we got it shipped in from the next state, you know, the best price, straight from the distributors, and we got it at R$3 each. So basically, we done it like an economical, you see, we really brought down the costs of producing 2 hectares of fruit, bananas, papayas, coffee, right? And then what we're gonna do, we're gonna plant the avocados and the macadamia by seed, right? So it's a simple system. Also, it's a system where, you know, in another area in Bruno's farm, he's planted a lot of varieties. We went ahead and we chose 60 fruit trees, varied fruit trees. So he's got his orchard for the family with all the variety, you know, so near the house. But for this, you know, economical system where we want to occupy the most amount of area to get it all producing and booming, I just wanted cash crops. I wanted crops that, you know, we're certain to harvest, and just cash crops, because he's a customer. I can't let him down. I can't be experimenting that much. You know, I want him to have his return and his profit. So we went for, you know, proven cash crops of the region. Even though papaya is not so proven, it's not so typical of the region, I know that we produce so much. So if we harvest 50% of the potential of that papaya plant, you know, that's a lot. There's a big cash opportunity there, because they're only 150 per seedling, you know, and we're able to lose so much. And it's just those crops, they fit in quite nicely information wise with, you know, with the emergent papayas and the bananas, emergent trees. And let's not forget, we're going to have the mahogany as well. So the papayas are great for mahogany. We're actually planting mahoganies along with the papaya in the same papaya bed. We're planting the mahoganies. You know, the legacy is going to be the mahogany in that papaya bed, where the papaya bed is shooting up as an emergent tree, and you've got the mahogany chasing after it. And I've got experiments here in my farm where mahoganies next to papayas 2 years later, a good 3 meters high, 4 meters high, and then mahoganies, you know, without that emergent information, 4 or 5 years later, you know, 1.5 meters, 2 meters high. So it's a very different information when you've got that emergent, you know, tree, given that competition for mahogany, you know, chasing it, and, you know, information, growth information, you know, really running after the papaya. So the papayas are there, very cheap. So the reason we went simple is so that we could economically plant the full 2 hectares in one go with very cheap seedlings. I intend to fill it all up with coffee maybe next year. So next year, if you can see the results, he's got 4 meters between tree lines. We've left it all with grass, where we're just going to be cutting for the mulching. Like you've seen there, very, very little material. If I was going to plant elephant grass on the edges of all those beds, first, I would want to manure the whole bed, which I haven't done. So we brought down costs. We haven't manured the whole bed. we've only manured locally in the tree seedlings. Had we manured the whole bed, then I could be more aggressive with grasses in the borders for mulching. So we really just counted with the native grasses that will grow, you know, in the 4-meter corridors between the tree lines. If I wanted to make it more complex, I would have to give it more manure in the whole bed, you know, and we've got the eucalyptus as well. So it's quite simple, but again, there's eucalyptus, there's papaya, there's banana, there's coffee, there's mahogany and avocados, right? So it's I suppose those are all proven cash crops, and I don't know if you know, we could have gone with more variety, citrus, every so many trees and that, but then, you know, it starts costing more, and it starts, you know, so I'm thinking we've done it every 4 meters so that with these single lines of trees, we give enough shade to the coffee. If we leave it open like 6 meters or even more, there's going to be too much sun coming in. It's going to be very aggressive with the coffee. So we've not planted it north to south. We've planted it east to west to provoke shade for the coffees. You know, I don't want that much sun coming in as well. So I am hoping that, you know, he's got funds so that next year we can come in and put triple lines of coffee in between those, you know, in those 4 meters in between each tree bed. Is there anything specific that I missed out on in the sense that you wanted to understand why it's simple, the system?
No, I think the point about variety is a good point. I was thinking of it as less dense, but I think you made a good point that it's not less dense, it's just less variety, and that helps me understand it a little better. Thank you. Yeah.
So what we're trying to do is have it locally, because I've only manured locally. So there I've planted 3, you know, I keep on saying pork beans everywhere, but it's jack beans. Because it's translated here, feijão de porco, so excuse me for that. So we've planted 3 jack beans, you know, a couple of tomatoes and a corn and pigeon peas. So all very local to protect that. And then in between one seedling to another, there's just going to be 1 eucalyptus. That's the only thing that's going to be in between. That's not going to be locally making good use of that local manure.
Gennaro, when you have triple lines of coffee in the middle as well, and so there's not, as I suppose, is there still grass there? What's the mulch provider when you have all of these extra fruit trees?
Yeah, that's a good point. For long-term sustainability, we're really going to need to count on the eucalyptus, because then we are planting eucalyptus every other bed. I mean, to every seedling, there's an eucalyptus next to it. So we are planting eucalyptus every 75 centimeters. In the first year, it's not going to produce any mulch for me, only the bananas and the pigeon peas and the pork and the jack beans and things like that. So, but you know, if we have eucalyptus every 75 centimeters with 75 by 4, you know, that we can generate enough organic matter from that. All right. But I would have to give an initial kick of organic matter through the jack beans. And also I'll be planting a lot of cassavas as well, you know, to shade off that and produce that information, you know, to block off some seeds. And also because I've manured all of that, I'll probably give a lot of corn. So I'd have to also, you know, bring in initial information for the first cycle, for the first year, where I'd be planting shorter term crops there, you know, to break up the information of that grass with when I do plant those coffees. But then like after the first cycle of short-term crops there, to break that up and produce that initial organic matter, I'd really be counting on the density of the eucalyptus to be feeding that. And I'm pretty confident that, you know, after the second year, we produce a hell of a lot of material from, you know, 75 by 4, you know, with those eucalyptus.
And actually the coffee itself produces lots of organic matter. I mean, the low strata of your system will usually be the heaviest organic matter production producer, you know. So, and then when you have a main crop that is a low stratum system, I mean, a low stratum plant, it becomes kind of hard to have grass because grass is usually exactly occupying that place. So, and since low stratum plants, they will have a very high density. So, you know, coffee and cocoa, for example, we're talking about, or pineapple in my case, we're talking about like this understory completely colonized by our main crop. So there's no room for grass. But these plants will produce quite a lot of organic matter because they will be pruned, you know, every year. They're going to be pruned when you have cocoa, for example. Cocoa will be pruned, you know, 3, 4, 5, sometimes 6 times a year, and not heavily pruned, but, you know, small prunes that you're going to do. And so you still have that organic matter production from trees, which is even higher quality than organic matter produced from grass. You know, it's more labor because there's no way to mechanize it, of course. But yeah, at the end of the day, you know, when you're doing larger systems, and I think it's important to make a difference here when we're talking about larger, because Jack asked about larger systems. You can have, it depends on what you're producing, right? It's not an absolute amount of area that constitutes a large system, because a large system for vegetable might be 1 hectare, a large system for fruit production might be 5, a large system for beef, you know, production might be 1,000 hectares, of course. But I think what the most important characteristic of when you're doing larger or like commercial systems, you need to be able to create protocols of management, right? So that's why they need to be simple, because you're either delegating the job to someone, or you are mechanizing the job. So if it is too complex, if there are too many decisions that need to be made inside the same a small area, because you've got all these different, you know, situations happening, it just makes it impossible to either mechanize or delegate. So you need to be able to delegate, and it needs to be something easy for a new person. You know, if a new person comes, the person needs to learn quickly what to do, you know, what needs to be done. It needs to be easy for one person to pass on to the other the kind of management that you do. And the more diverse the system is, the harder this becomes, because it's more species each worker needs to learn to manage. So like protocol creation is an essential part of doing a system that has business purposes. You know, otherwise it just becomes impossible. Unless it's a family-run businesses, and you know, you've got 2, 3 people, everybody working at the same time, everybody knows everything, all the plants, then of course you can have more diversity. But at the moment you start needing to delegate, you need to simplify, you need to create protocols for working that. Moving on to Jack's other question. Yeah, what happened to Jack? He's gone. But anyway, I don't know what happened. Wayne said he has to leave, but Jack simply gone. But anyway, he asked, is there a general rule for knowing what seeds can be broadcasted versus what must be planted? I mean, theoretically, every seed can be broadcast, right? There are very few seeds that in nature, they're actually planted, meaning they're buried in the ground. You know, most of the seeds, they will just go on top of the soil and they will sprout from there, or they will come on you know, animal shit or something of that sort. But there is a general rule that we use for burying seeds. You know, the smaller the seed, the less you should bury it. So usually very small seeds can easily be broadcast. But I think the most important rule is there are no animals that will carry your seeds. Okay, so if there, for example, here in my place, ants will carry pigeon pea, they will carry black velvet beans, they will carry all sorts of seeds. So if I just broadcast them and, you know, and leave the seeds on top of the soil, the ants will simply carry them. So it just makes it impossible for me to broadcast them. So they need to be buried. Also very small seeds, although they don't need to be buried. If you're in a lot, you know, the wind might take, you know, take seeds away. So you just need to consider that sort of stuff. Like, is the seed going to stay where I planted if I just broadcast them? Or is it going to, you know, be carried by the wind or by an animal? Is it going to dehydrate? Is it a seed that if, you know, heavy sun comes, is it going to dehydrate and maybe die? In that case, you know, you should probably bury it to protect it. So these are all things to consider, you know. And remember that most seeds you can sometimes broadcast and then cover with manure or just with mulch, and they will sprout, no problem. So
yeah, certain thinner seeds, they like to, you know, to integrate a little bit. So people, old school people, they'll sometimes let animals in, so the animals would literally step, and then you could, like, you know, consolidate that seed in the ground. More conventional systems, you know, you tie like a trunk in the back of a tractor, and then, you know, with the chain in that trunk would come and sort of like, you know, bounce on the soil and kind of like make sure all the seeds are in contact with the soil, you know.
Yeah.
So
yeah, but I wouldn't say there's a general rule, you know. Basically, I think, you know, if there are no animals that will carry it, if it's not going to dehydrate it, and if it's not so light that the wind will carry it, you're welcome to broadcast it.
Just on that topic,
Gareth
if you
asked, yeah, go on.
If you are, like, I guess if you are starting a system and you have some plants that you want to get a head start, you might plant them as a seedling and broadcast other stuff. Would that make sense, or is that not something you do?
It really depends, man, because we always prefer to plant things by seed because of the different root structure the plant creates. You know, you can, like, start things early by producing a seedling, especially when you have a real winter that will stall the growth of plants, or that, you know, you have a smaller growing season. I think starting things indoors makes a lot of sense. But for most crop, or if you want to plant specific varieties, you know, cloned plants and that kind of stuff, then it makes sense. But for most stuff, you're gonna want to plant seeds directly on the field because they just develop better root structure, and it's cheaper as well. So, you know, we really recommend that, you know, starting things from seed directly on the field. There's also other situations when you're gonna, you know, you've got two special seeds that you brought from India or from China or whatever it is, like this special lychee that only exists in China, and then you really need to take care of those. So you really want to make sure they will grow, establish themselves before planting them out. Another situation in which I will produce seedlings is if I already have a system established and I want to insert something new. So I'm going to produce a seedling and then do that. I recently did a video talking about that when I was inserting Clitoria in my field. So I started them in deep pots and then transplanted them into the field so that they have a bit of a head start since they're already starting late. One other possibility, which is also something that I need to do now, there's probably going to be videos coming out about that. When you have very small seedlings, very small seeds, they sometimes have a hard time sprouting with the system because we often have so many fast growers and really small seeds. They usually sprout and take a bit longer to grow. Eucalyptus is a great example. You know, if you sow eucalyptus seeds on the field, they might have a very hard time keeping up with the pace of the other species growing, because they're very slow when starting. They're really fast once they, after the first month, but they start very slowly because they're very, very small. See, guava, and there's one plant here called mutamba. That's Guazuma umifolia, the name. I'm gonna write here in the chat. It's a very fast grower, but small seed, so it takes up really, it starts really slowly, and the experience with sowing them is just very bad, because they won't be able to keep up with the system. They sprout very slowly, and then they're quickly overshaded by everything, and they have a hard time competing. But if you put them already in, a small seedling, then they will grow faster than everything else. So yeah, these are situations in which it makes sense to grow, to produce a seedling instead of just sowing the seeds.
Sometimes broadcasting can be done like organized as well, where it wouldn't be just, random broadcasting. There's many different systems, many different ways, but, you could wanna, in your 12-meter, animal system, you could have lines of pigeon peas, lines of, say, Mexican sunflower, and you could sow them in that little bicycle where you got that hand planter or any other tool, or by hand. But sometimes, you organize it into lines, so then when things sprout, you can identify things and you can look after it, and you can, give it that special cut and things like that, where you know where it is. So broadcasting in lines as well, in larger systems as well, can be an option.
Yeah, definitely. Got to have your plants organized. Gareth asked, are there any general principles to follow when adapting an established conventional orchard to a syntropic system? You're gonna have to prune everything, man. That's the first rule, right? We have to stimulate a resprout and a like new growth in the plants. But man, I think like I identify what the stratum and the successional stage of the plant is, in order to know what sort of stuff you're going to add to the plot that will benefit that specific plant. I think, the principles are the same as when you're starting out in agroforestry, but understanding that there is an adult plant there. It's already there. It's already established. You need to open up that clearing if you want to start to have initial stage crops. You're gonna need to open that clearing, but maybe you don't want to. Maybe you don't. I already have a citrus orchard established, let's say. I don't care about producing corn. I don't care about producing cassava. I don't care about producing squash. I don't care about producing this sort of stuff. So I don't need to open so much of a clearing. Then sometimes just lightly pruning the plants so that you don't lose a couple of years of production, which will happen if you heavily prune everything. So sometimes you can just enrich the system by adding seedlings. And then we come to the idea of adding seedlings and not broadcasting seeds, because you add seedlings so they can quickly grow and establish themselves in their proper stratum to add to the orchard, and they have no problem growing in the shade of those established plants. So I think the first thing is just figuring out what the purpose will be, and if you're going to use the crop already established as a main crop, then it's just a matter of enriching it, not necessarily opening up a huge clearing, right? But yeah, I think that's it.
So that's exactly it. So Felipe explained it. But as you noted, the first thing he said, you see, immediately what would come to our mind is bring it all down. Obviously, then he went on to explain that you might you're going to take a cut 1 or 2 years of your harvest. But you specifically mentioned syntropic. Syntropic does mean we will be planting from the first placenta, successional species, and it's really structuring. So there is a lot of benefit if you would consider bringing it all down. You might want to hold, you know, find that, but you know, there is, you know, that growth information when everything grows together, and you will be surprised how fast these trees will resprout and how quick they can be, you know, bearing fruit again, since they already established roots, and with all the information of all that new growth, that high density plant around it is going to be really vigorous, the resprout. And you might, you know, we see fruits bearing 1 year later. Yeah, we've seen it happen. People are, you know.
Yeah, but that really depends on species, man. That really depends on species. This is something that there's no way of generalizing, because there are like citrus. If you take it all down, it will never be bearing 1 year after that.
Won't.
You know, mango might be, cashew might be, sugar apple 100% will be, avocado might be.
What I'm saying is that you see cases.
It really depends.
You see cases. Yeah, you see cases. My mangoes didn't produce the next year, but you see cases. People posting, they see, look, I brought it all down, and 1 year later I'm producing again. My citrus and my mangoes, they weren't producing a year later when I was with the radical prune.
Yeah, but that's I'm just saying this is a physiological aspect of each species. You know, it's not necessarily something that it depends on the situation. You know, like citrus, it will not. It's impossible. If you take out all the canopy, it's impossible for it to produce 1 year later. So it's very important to know the species and the sort of physiology. In a very bad situation, for example, if you got mango trees, if it's really bad, if it can't sprout properly, you know, it might take 2-3 years maybe to bear fruit. Usually not. Usually it's going to bear fruit between 1 and 2 years. But it's important to understand the species and the physiology to know what you can expect, and you know, not to have unreal expectations. If you plan, let's, you know, bring it all down, and maybe 1 year later I'm going to be having fruit, but it's impossible with citrus. Not going to happen. All right, with other species you might be able to do that.
And that's great. It's great to
it's really
bring health into the system.
The
you know, you're going to be bringing health into the system with all the new shoes. Sometimes it was a conventional orchid. It was a little bit unstable, a little bit dependent on defensive sprays and things like that. So, you know, bringing it all down and having all new information will give it new life. That's going to be, you know, let's say, in line with everything else, with the system as a whole. You know, it's going to be as healthy as the rest of the system.
Yeah, but it really depends on what the plot looks like. You know, how healthy the plants are when you start, and on the purposes. Because if you do get, let's use the example of whatever orchard it is. You know, if you get a, you know, it's decent
avocado.
It's producing. Okay, you've got an avocado orchard. You know, it's decent. It's producing well. I would never recommend bringing it all down if you plan on using your avocados as a main commercial crop, right? And avocados they accept pretty severe pruning without jacks coming back. It doesn't have to be a 100% pruning, right? You can have a pretty radical pruning, but without pruning 100% of the plant, and still have an all right harvest in the next year, so that you can already start something going and open up enough sunlight for you to bring in stuff like, you know, black velvet beans. Maybe you want to enrich the grass in between, you know, whatever it is that you want to insert in the system will benefit from pruning. And so I think it needs to be studied by, you know, each case, how heavy the pruning is going to be. You're definitely going to prune. There's no doubt you're going to need to prune. But then if it's going to be a light pruning, if it's a medium pruning, if it's going to be heavy pruning, taking it all down, I think it depends heavily on the situation of, I would say, the health of the plant and the system in a whole. your plans for the plot, and the species that we're talking about. These are factors that we need to consider.
Consider as well the amount of organic matter, because when we say bring it all down, sometimes there's quality trees, one or two you might want to leave behind, but if you let go and you consider how much wood you bring it down as well, how much organic matter, so when you're pruning as well, it's not just the light information and the resprout information, it's also the balance of knowing that that's more matter as well, especially when you're talking about avocado, because it's potentially a lot of organic matter, and that can feed back and bring a whole new booming life to the system. So there's that equation as well of organic matter produced from the pruning and the benefit that can bring directly.
When you prune established trees which have quite a lot of trunk and like big branches, are you generally trying to mulch them down, or do you kind of just lay them on the ground? What do you do with the big stuff?
It really depends on what you're producing, right? But by mulching them down, you mean like shredding them, shredding the wood?
Yeah, like getting an enormous industrial mulcher type thing that arborists use, and well, I don't know, like I guess
any material, Gareth, any material you'd want to organize, right? So yeah. I mean, obviously, if you've got big heavyweight shredders, you might want to use that, because then you can organize it, in certain ways. But if you just any material you bring down, you want to organize. So the thicker material goes underneath. If you cut them systematically, in trunk sizes, if they're all like 30 or 40 centimeters, so they can, kind of go, organized, and then you'd want to have, with the leaves on top of that. So whatever material you would want to organize, so you want your trunks in direct contact with the soil so that it can decompose as fast as possible. And it all depends with how much, manpower you have to cut it into smaller blocks, and how you fit them in and things like that. Obviously, if you've got a big shredder, that's great. How much is that going to cost you worth of labor to take that bulk into the shredder and bring that material back? Or is that shredder walking through in the corridors? So, but you would want to organize thick trunks. There's no problem in organizing thick trunks on the spot as well. Just have them direct in contact with the soil and the leaves on top, kind of thing. So there isn't.
That was the main thing, really.
The thing is, it depends on what plants you have. How much you need to break it down. It depends on what sort of system you're running, right? Like if you're doing vegetable beds in between, you need to shred it down. There's no way to organize, right? But if you've got established trees, and it's you only got trees, it's a 100% tree system. Just cut it down roughly. It works perfectly well. It's very important to organize, like Gennaro mentioned. Of course, you're going to have to organize everything, but basically the more established trees you have, the less sensitive small plants you have in the plot, the easier organization is. The easier it is to organize material, the less labor you need to devote into it. Usually having shredders for small operations is just completely not viable. Recently I've been budgeting some, at least here in Brazil, and it doesn't pay the price at all. It would be a much better investment to be hiring people to chop things down, and that's it. It makes no sense for a small operation. But then once you have bigger operations, sure, then it might make sense to get industrial shredderers.
I've let
go. That's a general rule. The more sensitive the plants, the smaller they are, the more you're going to need to break it down. Otherwise, man, just with a machete, just cut everything quickly and just organize it properly.
And also the architecture of the tree that you're bringing down. If you've got very straight wood, say for example like jackfruit, very straight wood, and you're bringing that down, you know, sometimes you can consider layering that straight wood down in the corridors, even in between, say, vegetable beds or tree beds. And, you know, sometimes you just lay a straight trunk all the way down the corridor, you know, so that's very handy, because boom, it's just on the corridor and you can walk on that. It might not be so stable, but, you know, you've covered that, you know, that gap between one bed and the other. And that's just beautiful if you can get a nice long. So I do a lot of, when I bring down my eucalyptus, you know, a few years down the line, I do a lot of lying them down in the corridors, boom, you know, and that, you know, it saves me having to chop it up, you know, and organize it, you know, in other ways. Obviously, if you have like citrus and other, you know, bent, then that's going to be more machete and chainsaw into smaller pieces, so you can organize that. So there's that as well.
Yeah.
No, that's cool. I was just, yeah, the main point was, yeah, do you have to, do those big things have to exit the system? But obviously not, you can just organize it.
Yeah. And if you are
No,
using,
you want it, you actually want the logs in your system, but without
attract
shredding
different
them,
type of
because
fungus.
they do create a very specific kind of environment that is great for plants' roots, because they get to participate in the decomposition of the logs, and for, you know, specific fungi and small animals that will live inside. They need trunks, and trunks will absorb huge amount of waters. They will act as water storage for the plant. So it's definitely something you want to have there in your system, you know. Let's get a question here from one of the YouTube viewers. We've got a couple of questions from Govind. I don't know if Govind's still around, but give us a shout out if you are, man. He asked about rain requirements for bananas. He says he's planning to put bananas just beside contoured ditches, which are 5 months of monsoon filled 1 meter deep. Yeah, as long as the banana, where the banana is, doesn't get waterlogged, that should work fine. If the banana is waterlogged, or if its roots are waterlogged, that will kill them. But if they've got space that's not waterlogged, then they will just, you know, get as much water as they want and fill. Because the thing about water in plants' roots is that most plants, they can't get oxygen if the soil is waterlogged, and so that's why they cannot be in a waterlogged soil, you know, most plants. So they need to have at least part of the soil free of water. He also asked about if it's possible to grow coffee or cocoa under cashew. Most certainly, cashew is actually one of the best coffee shades I know of. It's just an incredible plant for shading coffee and for shading cocoa as well. So yeah, definitely possible.
And
no doubt.
Its leaves is incredibly enriching, isn't it? The cashew leaves, they decompose and become black soil very, very quickly.
Yeah, they're very, very good. Very good. So let's go through now these questions that you guys sent here in the chat, so that we can wrap this up. Adam asked if there is elephant grass. Is elephant grass sweet like sugarcane? Can you juice it in a similar way? I'm pretty sure you can juice it. It's probably not sweet as sugarcane at all. It's probably like very mildly sweet. Usually these grasses, they all have some sugar in this in the middle. And if you pluck out like leaves of grass with their little stem, white tip, and it's kind of good to munch on. They're kind of sweet, but definitely not much. There is a variety of sorghum which people juice like sugarcane. Sweet sorghum, I think. You could look that up. Okay, Eric tasted the stem of elephant grass. It did not taste sweet. It tasted kind of tasteless. It's good. Has anyone done any subsoiling with clay soils? Yeah, we have, not super heavy clay, like 60-70% clay, but up to 40-50% clay. I've done that quite a lot. It's it's usually this is the thing about subsoiling. You usually want to do it with the soil dry, because otherwise it doesn't break things up. It's different than using a harrow or a rotary hoe, where you want the soil to be slightly wet, slightly moist, like we meant to talk before. Subsoilers, you usually want to have it dry. Depending on how compacted it is, the subsoiler will simply not go in the soil. You pretty much need a strong enough tractor and maybe adding weight to the subsoiler, right? Tractors usually have that. You put on weight so that it makes sure that the subsoil manages to go in the soil. And what people usually recommend also is use the harrow once before using the subsoil, so that the subsoil doesn't need to break open that first layer of harrow will kind of loosen up the first 10 or 20 centimeters, and then the subsoiler, Eric asked, I work in a plot with a lot of K. There's a lot of rough sawdust available in our surrounding. A thick layer of sawdust helps a lot to decompact the soil. There's no doubt about that, man. Like we said, life is what will really structure the soil properly. So, you know, covering the soil, having plants' roots work around, they will definitely decompact soil and create a nice soil with that crumble-like structure. And there are specific plants which are called like vegetable subsoilers. They will pretty much do the same job of destroying these hard pans that form deep into the soil. Pigeon pea is one. Sun hemp is another. Turnip is another. You know, you've got foraging turnip, which is very strong, and it will usually decompact these hard pans as well. Wayne asked, people in Myanmar mix sand with their clay. What would be better, sand or sawdust? I think Eric was talking about a layer of sawdust on top of the soil, right, Eric? Yeah. You usually don't want to mix organic matter in the soil because it will trigger anaerobic decomposition. That's something that kills plants' roots, right? It's going to release sulfuric acid and other, you know, methane and other gases which are not good for plants' roots. And it will also create bags of air as organic matter decomposes. So you really want to have organic matter on top of the soil, or lightly incorporated, you know, shallowly incorporated, maximum 5 to 8 centimeters. Because sometimes when you're doing tractor work, you know, sometimes you end up incorporating a bit. So that's, but then you only want to incorporate it superficially.
Is that true for manure also, Felipe? Like in a tree nest, do you want to put manure deep down, or still just concentrate the manure in the top layer of a tree nest or a tree hole?
No, manure is something that you can incorporate in the soil, and that you want to incorporate in the soil, especially when you're starting out the system, because it's so nutrient rich that it will stimulate plant roots to go deep. If you have a too high concentration of nutrients in the surface of the soil, plants are not encouraged to send their roots to greater depths because they get everything they need from the surface. So that's not even a very good thing. So you definitely want to incorporate it deep.
I see. So it's just the mulch things that you wouldn't want to bury deep, such as like sawdust or wood shavings or grass.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
You know, there's a hint of principles within this topic, where, you know, if you're bringing in sand, it's almost like you're bringing in soil. You see, so like with the principles, you know, I'm not very comfortable with the idea of purchasing something that's gonna I'm going to purchase this, incorporate it in the soil, and fix my situation. Obviously, you're going to say, yeah, well, we do that with manure and things like that. But there is a hint of these principles there, where we really like to fix the soil through processes. Enable life, promote life, and then find the balance in your soil, through the processes, rather than the idea of purchasing this material and injecting it and then incorporating it and you fixed it. Like, it's not sustainable in ways where you're buying part of your soil, you're purchasing soil, you're purchasing compost, you're buying this stuff to bring in. Obviously we do purchase shredded wood to cover, we do purchase manure, but there is a hint of principles there to be careful with, to value, processes. And that's how you're going to get the soils you're looking for.
Yeah, and obviously, large scale or even medium scale, it's impossible. It's completely not feasible to have enough sawdust or sand to mix with soil to actually create a difference in its texture. It's just impossible.
So energetically wise, it doesn't work.
Yeah, for small scale stuff, you're producing maybe some starting mix for potting plant, for producing seedlings. You're gonna have to do that, to other stuff. For maybe a small vegetable bed, you might want to do that, just for your vegetable garden to get a bit of a lighter soil. But for systems, just not possible. So they're just sending some comments to some questions. There's another question here in YouTube. Thiago Freitas, any idea about using Pittosporum undulatum as biomass provider mulching? Invasive species here, grows everywhere. No need to plant eucalyptus. I have no idea what plant that is. I actually researched it here. But man, if it grows everywhere, if it's a weed, I'm all for it. If it's invasive, and if people hate it, that even adds more to it. Probably a good plant. I mean, you got to study the resprouting capacity of the plant and what sort of succession stage it belongs to know how long it will last into the system. See if it's something they're going to be using for the first couple of years or if it's something that's going to be long lasting. But I think that's it, man. If it grows everywhere, if it's invasive, I think you're good to go. And of course, another thing is, it's important to understand, like I said, like the succession stage and what stratum it occupies to see if it's not going to be competing with main crops in your system, right? The good thing about eucalyptus is that it's an emergent plant and it grows really fast. It usually does not compete with any of the commercial crops that we have because most fruits are not emergent species. There are very few fruit trees that are emergent. And so, these eucalyptus and such, they work very well because of that. Very rarely compete with our main crops. I know I've had bad experiences with using, when you're growing banana, citrus or stuff like that. I've had some negative experiences using medium and high stratum organic matter producers because they just, there's no space for them. I can't allow them to grow a full canopy before pruning because they're taking up my banana spaces, they're taking up my prickly pear spaces. So it's that's important thing. Your service species should never compete with your main crop. This is very important. Cashew as emergent, can it tolerate shade above it? Cashew, Helen is asking. Cashew is, although I've heard people calling it an emergent, for me, it's very clearly a high stratum plant. Not an emergent. It will tolerate like not shade directly above it, but side shade, it will tolerate pretty nicely. Coconuts are the best emergent plant for cashews. that I've seen. I've never seen anything as good as coconut as an emergent plant for having it with cashew. No doubt about that. So, you know, in the coast of Mozambique, they do a multi-stratified agroforestry, kind of by accident, but they do it. They will have coconuts as an emergent. They will have cashew as a high stratum. They will have mango as that medium to high stratum, and then they will have citrus and custard apples, many different varieties of custard apple or sugar apple as their medium to low stratum plants. Very common there. You see it everywhere, and all these components, you know, coconut, cashew, mango, citrus, and sugar apple on the bottom. Yeah, I mean, coconut, Helen's saying I've also seen coconut in Ceará. Coconut, it's all over Brazil's coast. You're gonna find it everywhere. But here in Brazil, there's no, you'll see monocultures of coconuts on the beach, right? It's very rare to see other species growing in the middle of it, because they were planted and people just destroyed everything else. So it's a pity. Oh, you saw it mixed with cashew. Cool. Good stuff. It is a great consortium, coconut and cashew. It's really good. Eric's asking, is coconut husk a good organic matter? It's one of the best. It's one of the best. Coconut is amazing. It's so rich because it's got all these minerals it gets from the sea usually. So it's highly valuable organic matter. If you can shred it to pieces, then you can use it in large scale, right? Because the problem of coconut is that you kind of have to organize it, otherwise it becomes a big of a mess on the soil. Small scale, you just get it split in half and put it upside down, you know, with the shallow part to the soil, and it will create a very nice moist environment there for animals.
I can about get 500 coconuts per month from somebody. So I try to start coconut oil, but the coconut husk is a problem if you cannot do anything with it. So I asked this question.
Man, yeah,
you know,
it's pure gold.
It's not as tough to shred as it seems. You know, you think you need something really powerful, but it's not. With simple shredders, you can shred coconut. I won't say like not home shredders, but like it doesn't have to be, you know, it does take more work to shred, you know, 15-centimeter logs than coconuts. So they're not that demanding as it seems, not that scary. You know, with smaller, even sometimes electric shredders, you can already be shredding coconuts.
Yeah, there are some small shredders specifically for that.
Yeah. In Brazil, what do they call that brand?
Trap.
Yeah, they have a long.
Yeah, the TR200, which is considered very simple, and they do coconuts. You know, TR200 is not going to do nothing for us when we're talking about logs. It's just but you know, they do coconuts.
Yeah.
So, like we had the TR500 for logs, and that was 14 horsepower. It's a big leap.
Whoa.
You know, and
yeah, but it's great, man. Definitely, if you have an infinite supply of coconut husk, just bring it in, man. No doubt about that. I like to say that, you know, the best organic matter is the one that you have, man. There's no there are no restrictions when the matter is organic matter. I mean, I wouldn't get stuff that's polluted with herbicides and the like, because then it's just going to have a negative impact on the soil. But other than that, just anything is a go.
Yes. Thank you.
think going back to Gareth's, when we're talking to Gareth about, you know, pruning and shredding versus cutting the logs and things like that, also consider if you're going down the shredding avenue, you know, if they are straight logs, if you are like, again, shredding eucalyptus, it's a lot easier because you can put like a 5-meter thing and, you know, and it just eats it all up. If you're talking about all bent branches, consider that, you know, heavy labor in comparison, you know, because then you've got to organize all this material so that it can feed in, you know, depending on the size of that you can receive, you know. So when you're talking about straight logs as well, that makes it more viable if you're considering shredding.
Yeah. Also, you just mentioned not using material that has been kind of contaminated with herbicides, and that if you're in a conventional orchard that has been doing that for, you know, 20 years, is that a problem to be using to be shredding and using that as your mulch?
No, I mean recently contaminated. You know, stuff like if you go to sometimes carpenter shops, maybe they have wood that has been chemically treated with insecticides and this sort of stuff. That might be very damaging for the soil. But you know, it's conventional orchard. Maybe they've been spraying for a while, but it's not like there's going to be a huge amount of it already there. Of course, they've been causing damage to the soil for a long time, but you know, there's no problem bringing that all down and feeding the soil.
Yeah, it's not like you would spray it and then prune it. Like,
Yeah,
so that it's
exactly.
fresh.
But then if you're spraying it there, it's going to be falling on the soil anyway. So
Yeah, that's my line of thinking is that, you know, who we're fooling. If it's on the leaves, it's on the soil, you know, so
exactly.
we're gonna, you know, start from here. So, but
Yeah,
you know, that will benefit, you know, you will benefit with the mulching already.
Yeah,
exactly.
You will be triggering positive impact.
All right, guys, any last question? I think we can take one more, and then we should wrap it up. If you guys got anything more, let's do one more and then wrap it up.
what do we got? Nothing comes to mind straight away.
I'll throw one out about the clay, the friability of clay for working clay soil. Would you actually like add water? Would you like spray down your soil before tilling it if it's too dry, or how would you recommend getting that correct moisture level?
Well, if you have irrigation, if it is an area that will have irrigation, I would set up the irrigation beforehand, irrigate it, and then till it. Okay.
Okay.
If I don't have irrigation, then it's a matter of waiting for the rains. Then not much you can do about that, because the thing is that if you do tractor work without proper moisture, sometimes the soil is not plantable after the tractor work, because you've got these big chunks of like kind of rock, you know, almost like rock-like structures, and then it's just kind of really hard to plant on those. So I would consider irrigating.
It just seems like,
if possible.
Yeah, it seems like, you know, ideally you'd work with, you know, with the first rain, you'd allow the first rain to come through. Economically, that'll be, you know, great help in hand. But do consider as well, when you're hiring tractors, that first rain, you're not going to be the only person who wants that tractor after the first rain. And if you're hiring it, you don't have the power of choice to say the specific date. It could be the case, but out here, you know, the rains come, everybody wants the tractor. So, you know, if I'm not the owner of the tractor, I'm just going to be in line and wait in a big queue where, you know, that's going to cost me, because they could put me in the back of the line, and then, you know, I'm waiting for the right day. So also try align that, try be one step ahead on that, where if you're going to need a tractor just after the first rain, you know, be in touch with the people a month early, start reserving, start getting yourself into that queue and say, look, I'm going to need it in 2 weeks from now. Don't forget about me, you know, make sure that you're hammering, because if you get to the day, I need it for tomorrow, they're like, oh, listen, I've got so much work lined up here already. And then you're going to miss the timing.
Pay in advance, man. Pay 50% in advance. Say, look, I
book
want
that,
the
you know what I'm
first
saying?
one, maybe offer extra, you know, I'll pay you 20% extra or 10% extra, or maybe, you know, but I want to be I need tractor at this moment, you know, after the first rain, I need it here, and I'll pay you 50% ahead, or so, you know, that there's all sorts of possibilities, but it is
Because
very
otherwise
important.
you can
Like the moisture of the soil for harrow work, it's very important, especially in clay soils, man. Especially in heavy clays. It's really because that's it, man. If you put the harrow in a very dry soil, depending on the soil, so you're just gonna get big chunks of clay. You're not gonna get a properly loosed up soil. There are some situations in soils that you can prepare. I've seen some soils which also have decent amount of clay, but also they're like high clay, high sand. Sometimes you can work with less moisture, but then there is a problem, and I'm gonna try to share a video with you later. When the soil is very dry, you lose soil, man. There's huge erosion when you put the harrow in. I've got a video showing, we were doing this soil preparation in a course in a nearby city, and they had this part which was pretty heavy clay, but there was quite a lot of sand as well. So we were able to put the harrow in the field. We had to be, there was no option of waiting for the rains because it was a 4-day course. So we just had to do it right there and then. You have no idea the amount of soil that the guy lost just because, you know, the clay particles, they're so small that they just went up and the wind was just taking, you know, many kilos of soil away. So that's another problem of tilling, because clay particles are very small. They're very, very small. Right? Sand particles,
timing is everything.
Clay particles are small. They will be taken by the wind.
So when working with the season, timing is everything. And if you're not the owner of the tractor, make sure that, you know, you got that right timing and you're not left, you know, in the back of the queue.
All right, so we'll do a rain dance and we'll bring cookies to the tractor owner, is what you're saying.
Exactly, man. It's a great way to summarize it. You got it perfectly. That's great. All right, guys. Let's wrap it up. There's one last comment here in the YouTube. Best of everything said. Gypsum helps with clay soil. Gypsum is cotton, right? Is that right? Is my botanical knowledge up to date?
Gypsum, I think, is a kind of
gypsum.
lime.
Gypsum is gypsum. Oh yeah, cotton is gossipum, I think. Yeah, gypsum. That's what we call gesso in Portuguese. Yeah, gypsum is something that's not used a lot. It should be used more actually, because it's a good source of sulfur, which is a macronutrient for plants, and also calcium, and it's going to do work in the subsoil, whereas the lime will not. So gypsum is definitely good.
It's quite interesting material as well, as it penetrates, you know, quite easily with the water. Some other rock dust, you know, they don't dissolve and they don't penetrate. And, you know, it's quite a cheap material out here where we can put, and we know that the water's going to wash it down and it's going to reach deeper in the soil. Is that correct, Felipe, from what I understand?
Yeah, exactly. Gypsum will exactly work in lower, in bigger depths of soils where lime will not. So lime will only have an effect where it's incorporated, right? But gypsum will go down and it will neutralize aluminum and supply calcium and sulfur to crops.
So what I'm doing here is I'm actually coming back a year or two later, and I'm throwing some of this gypsum because, you know, I know it's going to penetrate. I know I'm going to make good use of it deep down, even though I'm not incorporating it.
Yeah, exactly. All right, guys, let's wrap it up, man. Thank you all for participating. Thank you all over there in YouTube who have been watching it. And yeah, it was a great chat. Hope you all enjoyed it. And remember to start thinking about your questions now already and writing them down for the next one.
Awesome.
Alright.
Thanks, guys. That's great.
Thank you.
Cool. So we're gonna try to keep this as the routine, like every third Saturday of the month. We'll do this live broadcast on YouTube. Make sure we manage to keep that up. All right, everyone.
Great. Nice.
Thanks a lot for being here. It was a pleasure being with you, and we'll see each other soon.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Bye
Till
bye.
next.
What's happening there? Is Gareth on holiday? Where you at? Is Gareth on holiday?
I'm at my dad's house. I'm in town.
Oh,
All
Yeah.
right. All right,
Yeah,
in town. Yeah.
Not bad. Yeah, pretty nice spot. Nice and sunny today.
Cool.
Brilliant.
I hope it's
See.
not as hot as here.
All right, take care, guys.
Cheers. Oh, that's a nice.
Right by the
very
beach. It's
neat.
beautiful.
Nice.
That's a nice life.
All right, man.
Brilliant. Well done.